Hi everyone, and welcome back to another watercolor class. Today we are going to be doing just this little loose floral here, and let me go ahead and point out a couple things to keep in mind. We're going to need to do a little bit of negative painting here, so we have that a little bit darker here to push this one behind, leaving a lighter edge for this petal. And then I've left this edge here brighter and tucked in some other little fluff underneath there, just to give it a little more fullness. So you have to kind of, depending on how you lay out each one, depending on how you develop your petals, you can leave a little bit of white space like I did down in here. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're doing the shape of this one. But you can see we've got some very loose greenery, some little ones in the back that kind of taper up. So this would be really cute for like a little card front. Or just again, everything we do as far as just kind of keeping our practice up. I'm going to clean off my pans a little bit here. I've got ones that I've contaminated. Alright. I'm using the Winsor Newton Cotman set, and it's not a super expensive set, but it really has everything I need. With the exception, I've taken their white and changed out the magenta for magenta here. And then I have a little tiny bit of black in the well, in case I need that, but I won't need that for today. So I'm going to start off and kind of place where these flowers are going to go, and that will be my first step there. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of my magenta. I can show you here, we'll use a little bit of the crimson as well, like I've got the crimson like down in here. The reason I like having magenta in my palette, one, it's going to give you a lot better pinks for your florals. You can do some really nice flesh tones and corals with it. It also gives me a lot more options when it comes to mixing colors like purples. This is a very loose kind of style, so I try not to get too fussy with it. You can see some of this where I keep it a little stronger at the tip, and then down in here it's just a little more blurred, and I kind of did that on purpose. Just try not to be too fussy with it. Let's do this. I think I'm going to actually bring in just a tiny bit of yellow here, and that's going to actually warm up that magenta a little bit, because it does really give you some really soft kind of pink coral colors. I love that kind of color there. So I'm just going to kind of plan out my basic, and this is going to be really light, so I can come back and do more later. So I'm going to start off with kind of this one, and I don't have to kind of put it everywhere. Then I've got one that comes here. Notice I'm not going to fill all that in because I want to be able to have some options later. Okay, and then here's my center of my flower. So this is this front petal here. I'm going to leave that gap. And then I've got this one that kind of comes here. So in the worst case scenario when I do these, if this is my lightest color that I have showing, then I'm going to tuck a little one back in here. Then I've got a little bit down here. So I'm going to be intentional about leaving that white space there. One, it's going to define where my center is, and it's going to give me some options as far as how I'm going to develop those edges. So while I'm here, I can maybe feed in a little bit here down into where I'm going to have maybe some little stronger bits that kind of come in towards that center, and a little bit down in here as well. I'm using a different brush today, and I'm going to tell you it's not one that I'm used to. This is a Creative Mark Mimic brush. It's a nice brush. I can tell you that the one I typically use that has that yellow handle, it's a Creative Mark brush too. It's I think it's called Inspirations. It's a little bit firmer, and I tend to like a little firmer brush. I know most people really like a really super soft brush for watercolor. I think because I've always painted with acrylic, I tend to like a brush with a little more spring, but that's just my preference. I'm going to go ahead and lay out this one. So if I kind of map in, okay, just a little bit. So I kind of want that oval like this. People always want to make their flowers perfectly round, but if we kind of oval them, it shows that they're kind of laying back against us, that we're not looking at it directly. Okay, so not fussing a whole lot over that. So I can see on my edges here, I've made this one a little more frilly on the edge, so I'll just kind of soften that up a little bit. And I can go ahead and map in where these are going to go, and I'll use a little bit of my ultramarine blue. More of that. And then I think I need a little more because we're a little bit deeper. Then I'm going to bring in, let's do a little crimson on this one to make our purple. Yeah, I can always come in and add some other tones later. And then so here, I'm just going to kind of map a basic shape. And again, I want that color fairly light. So if I've got, you know, one that's kind of coming here, just putting that base in. One that's coming here. One there. And one there. I say, looking at my color now, I think I did use the magenta on that one. But those will still, we still have lots more to do to those. Okay, and then now we will go ahead. Hey, Cody. Just, the dog wants to play. Okay, so I'm going to take my Viridian Green here. And I know that needs to be a little more wet there to be able to get some of that. I've got quite a few, so I'll go ahead and give me a decent pile of that. And I'm going to bring in my yellow ochre here next. That's going to give me a color almost kind of similar to the sap green. It's going to be maybe a little duller, a little warmer. But I want a kind of a nice, soft, earthy color like that. If you want to compare what you get to the sap green, depending on what your color choices are. So you can see they're almost kind of similar. This is just a little deeper, a little warmer. I would say where probably some of that has to do with the yellow ochre, because it does have, it's a little more granular, it's got a little more opacity to it. So that tends to change that depth that you get from that color. Let's blot this up. Okay, so I think I'm going to start off here. Oh, that's a good deal darker, isn't than what I've got on there. So bring in more yellow. going to kind of pull some of this down. And let's pull in, because I'm not going to come back over these leaves a lot. I want them very soft, very muted. So once I kind of get it in, I'm okay with that. When you've got something like this, if you do want just a tiny bit of detail in it, usually keep a little tiny piece of like a credit card, or you can even take one of those little key fob kind of things, and then I just take a little cut so I've got a little sharper corner here. So I could come in and just put some little subtle, you know, I want to keep those soft eyes, so I wouldn't come in and do a whole lot to those. And then as that fills down in there, that's going to give you those little darker veins. Oh, and I'm blotting on that again here. We'll just come in, and then now we're going to put one here. Okay. And we'll bring some little bits here. These are a little closer than what I've got. The other one. Okay, so just some little implied leaves. We'll bring some little stems. And then my leaf's not going to be able to be quite as big here. I just don't have quite as much space. So I'll kind of still get a full leaf in. There, and then pull that through. And then by picking up some of the yellow ochre and bringing that in, that just gives me some different little tone variations. That around now. And I'm going to bring a little bit of these tones in here so they are still kind of tied into what I've got going on. You know, and for me, I find the ones that, like, if I don't put myself in a box that I feel like I have to have something done a certain way, or it has to be exactly like that, I enjoy my painting time much better. I like to have that kind of chance to adjust. Or so now, since this one here, I'm going to probably make this leaf a little bigger than what I've got here, just to kind of give it a little more I think what I might even do is kind of tie that into there. Soft leaves in here. soften all that out. And I think I need just a little bit where the contrast is a little greater and this is super soft. I just need enough that kind of transitions this into here a little bit, just so they look like they belong. Like I don't even have to quite finish all of that leaf, I just need a little bit of that same intensity into this one. Okay, and then I could even, since I'm not going to be coming back over this greenery a lot, you know, I could come and do a couple little splatters down on there. And so now I'll come back and develop these flowers here. So again, I'm going to come back into this color here and see where I want to bring up that intensity. I think I'm going to tend to keep those outside edges of the petals a little lighter, and then we can bring a little bit some yellow into that. Come up to here. So now if I come into this here, bring in a little bit of that yellow, and while that kind of pink color is still wet, and again, when I'm putting this in, I want it to be nice and soft, so I'm not going to leave a real distinctive brush stroke. Okay, and then what I'll do here is I'll come in now with a damp brush, and on these spots along in here, so I'm gonna just, so that's nice and feathered there. I don't have that distinctive brush stroke. So right here on this edge, I'm gonna soften that. Bit in here. Remember, as you're working along, if you need a little extra time to come and do these, I would just pause the video and then you can work on yours and then restart it. And we'll bring a little bit right in there. Just a little hint of that. And then while this is damp, I am going to go ahead and bring a little bit of this in here. And then now I'm just going to take a damp brush again. Just soften this out, and then I'll probably I'll come back over this again So if you can see, I'm doing a little lighter bit of a flower right now than what I have in here. You could come in, just a little bit at a time. And then again on these edges, we'll soften. So we'll need this to dry so I can give some differentiation here between some of the petals. I'm okay, I think, here on some of these other ones, but we'll need to let that dry before I mess with it too much more. And then a little bit of, oh, I got my blotting towel over here, and what I keep doing is I'm dripping it across. Okay. All right, so we'll come in, add a little bit in here. Again, I'll come in, now I've blotted off my brush, and I'm just going to soften everything. So just a damp brush right now. I bring a little bit of the crimson in here. Bring a little bit of yellow. Okay, and then we'll work on these and let those continue to dry. So if I want some of these spots a little stronger now, let's come in here with our blue, and then let's do some of the purple here with this. So you can see a difference here between this purple with the crimson and this purple here using the same blue, ultramarine blue, and the magenta. So this is a little more violet, that's going more into that warm purple, you know, kind of in that like eggplant kind of family. Okay, and we're just going to tap in some of this. It doesn't have to be everywhere, because we're just going to keep layering to this. So I can put some of my other little parts kind of down in between. So these are kind of cone shaped is the what we're working for. Now here, if I bring in some of this magenta, and see, I'm going to kind of aim to put some of these in between where I put the purple. And these are just, I'm just barely touching. do here is I'll take some of this now, splatter a little bit of that on there, and then we're going to come back over these again. Okay, so I cut that in, and then I'm just gonna soften that out. And some of that now, blot. And I'm just going to soften that out. I'm going to skip this one right now because I'm going to come back and I'll use a little more of the crimson to make that one a little more different. As we're tucking that one kind of in behind. That in, blot my brush so it's just damp again, and soften that out. So here's where I've got that crimson now. I'm going to use a little bit of the crimson kind of along that edge. So what I can do here, since everything's kind of like run together, I can come in now and kind of lift just with a damp brush right up in here. And let's lift a little bit. This is where a little stiffer brush can be a little more handy. And then I'll come in and bring in a little more intensity here. It's going to push that back behind. So we'll do that again as this dries. So the intensity on these two now match up a little bit more, where that one was much lighter in the beginning. And so that's one thing that, like, they don't have to be exact. You know, if you look at flowers, you'll get different tones, but they need to be at least a little bit similar. And that's where you want to be able to kind of look at your art and ask that question. Do these look like they belong together? Are they at least similar enough that they make sense, that says these are related, you know, that these are the same flowers? Here I'm just trying to darken, like if I darken this edge a little bit, that's going to help to keep it a little different from that, where I've got the kind of golden color next to there. And I'm just asking, okay, you know, where do I need to make some distinctions between these? this kind of deeper purple here. Down in. So it's just kind of fidgeting along, you know, where you have to ask yourself questions and is it making sense? Or what and how do I need to distinguish between the parts? Because everyone's is going to be a little different. So I'm going to bring a little bit more of that red and darker color into here. Okay, and then I'm going to come in here. So I don't want to come, I'm going to leave at least that little bit of that lighter edge right along there, so I can tell that that's one petal, this is the petal, and then this is the one behind. Okay, and then I'll just come in and soften this. So again, I want to stay away from this and this, so this pushes this back. Okay, and I think I'm going to bring a little bit of that crimson red into these back ones here too. Just a little bit, so it brings a little more harmony between them. A little bit of that in. If you see here, I keep putting my hand in that, and I've smeared up some things over here. Okay, so this one's probably a little drier than what that one is, so I'm going to go ahead and put in that yellow center, and I will use my same yellow that we've been using here, the cad yellow. Okay, I'm going to blot out my brush because I don't want this super wet going on. In. All right, and I will probably need that to dry unless I can get this a really dry mix here. See if I can get this off of the brush. If I look at this, maybe I might have used a little bit of yellow ochre in with that. I can still kind of come in and tone that back a little bit. I just have to be careful because where that's wet, I can end up with it all. I just bring a little yellow ochre now and keep that on the dry side. Alright, so, you know, again, you could come back and keep working this. You probably want to do, this one is still wet. I don't know if you can tell, but I can see the wetness here. This one I can probably work on. Let's bring a little magenta kind of back into that center a little bit. Okay. I'm just going to blot out my brush, and just with it damp, I'm just going to soften that around. So, you know, I on these things like these, I tend to like to keep them, you know, a little textured. That darker there. Magenta back in, and then I will come soften it all out. So the more contrast that we bring in, you know, that's going to give that a little more depth to it. And again, just kind of make it look a little more vibrant. I mean, we do have to be careful that we don't overpaint them, just because then it just all kind of starts to run together. All right, but I'm content with how that looks. Again, you can see they look very different. I try not to put myself in a box to say it has to be one certain way, and I hope that you find that too for yourself, that you can come back, paint something another time, and then find you've got a little more freedom to say, oh, I'm going to mix this up, I'm going to try this, and that you find that it's something that you enjoy, that you start to enjoy that process in your painting. That's where it becomes more intuitive, and I think you feel more connected with what you're doing in your art as well. So I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you can give us a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe that you don't miss any content, and we'll be sure to see you next time.